The First Million Words, Episode 16, an interview with Aliette de Bodard.
I don't know, man. My throat's kind of messed up, but if you insist, well, I can't think of any songs right now.
No, I'm so sorry about that. My laptop crashed, and I've never actually done it on my desktop, and it turns out the microphone, well, I don't know how to make it work. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was having. Oh, hang on. All right, sorry. I'm out in my garage, and I had to close the door, but. I was having problems like that last night. Where we were getting ready, and I ended up having to just kind of flick my microphone like directly in the center of it. And then it started working. Otherwise, I would get horrible static in the background. So,
I mean, the mic is working fine. It's just my computer doesn't seem to see it. So, I suspect this is the kind of problem that will not get solved within 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Like moving to plan C.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not a problem that'll be solved by flicking the mic, yeah. All right.
I wish.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually, I know we had that, the time difference kind of confusion before, and I pretty much just woke up a little bit ago.
Okay.
On the weekends, I have an overnight job. Which is actually where I get a lot of my writing done. So I was awake all night last night, and to add on top of things, I think my son just got home. My grandma was babysitting him. Time out for 5 minutes, and I'll be right back. It'll be like 5 minutes. Hang on.
Weird chairs. Telling you.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like the gods are trying to keep us from interviewing, but we defy the gods.
Yeah.
Sort of.
So, where are you? Are you in Florida or in California?
Oh no, I'm in Florida. I'm in Miami.
Okay.
So yeah, it's
midday-ish.
Oh yeah, it's nice. The sun is just looks like it just high enough to make everything terribly hot, and then every now and then it'll rain for 5 minutes so that the sun can then come out again and turn that into just humidity, and it's great. It keeps everything as a sauna here, and it's really fun. That's okay. I've got another 3 months and I'm moving to Washington D.C., so I'm good.
Oh, yes.
Right. Exactly. I only have to put up with this for a little while longer. And then I'll go somewhere where there's weather that doesn't kill me.
Well, here the weather's fine.
I don't know. Well, it sounds like Ben's child just jumped off of something again. He tends to do that.
Oh. How old is he?
He's going to be 2 in a few months. And he's
discovered the world.
Yeah, he's discovering that jumping off of the couch hurts. But jumping off of the couch while holding a pillow makes it hurt less. But sometimes he forgets to grab the pillow and then just jumps. And
oh dear.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm so sorry about the lack of professionalism. We're new. But
don't worry. Like I held you guys up for 30 minutes with my various technical problems. So.
Oh no,
I don't
it's
exactly
okay.
feel like a professional here either.
Oh no, that's okay. I mean, I've read. Well, I haven't read a lot of the short stories, but I was reading Servants of the Underworld, and I really liked it. It was so different. But God, I should save this for when we're recording. But I just have to say, I thought it was really awesome. Like
thank you.
The fact that it was just so so different, and shows the Aztecs as actual human beings instead of just like cannon fodder or savages, and I thought it was awesome.
Oh, thank you. That's a lot of what I was trying to do with it. So I'm glad that turned out okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not Mexican. I'm Puerto Rican, but it's same sort of, well, not same sort of anything. It's well, we were kind of taken over by the same colonial power, so we kind of share a language. I mean, not Aztec. I don't speak Aztec.
I don't imagine many people. I guess the remnants of local natives in Mexico, but in Mexico it's much more mixed than in the U.S. So.
Oh yeah. I mean, you'll find every now and then you'll find a small village that speaks a completely different language, but it's not really the same thing as Aztec. But yeah, I understand.
It's very different.
All right, I'm back.
Aha.
Sorry, what? Did I miss anything?
Okay. Let me guess what happened. Did William jump off of something?
Yes, he did.
Okay, that's what I thought. I called it.
Yeah, he hit the back of his head on the tile floor.
Ow.
Ew.
And but he's okay now.
Cool.
Yeah, he's usually okay like 2 seconds, maybe 10 seconds after something really traumatic happens to him. He's like he forgets about it and he's fine. So
Distracted with Mickey Mouse. And that seems to work, just...
Yeah, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it right because I wasn't sure if it was Aliette or Aliette.
Aliette.
Aliette, okay. I might slip and keep saying Aliette because I grew up in Chicago, and that's kind of how we
the accent.
Yeah.
The accent. Don't worry. Most French people can't either pronounce it or spell it. So.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
I'm used to it.
Okay, good. Because the Chicago thing is like, it would be oh my god.
Okay.
So those ahs become as, and so.
Come on, practice your non-regional dialect, man. What do you... Professionalism, man.
I'm not a news anchor, so. All right, so we'll get to know you.
Okay.
So we'll go ahead and get started now. So tell us a little about yourself.
A little about myself.
Yeah, just a little.
Okay. I'm a writer. I'm a geek. I'm a rice addict and a tea addict.
Ooh.
And I love to cook.
Nice. Well, there you are in a nutshell.
Yeah, we were thinking of more like what was your first memory, and then every single waking moment since then. That
Okay.
No, I'm kidding.
Ooh.
No,
How
I'm
much
kidding.
time have you got?
Well, with how podcasts work, we can go however long we want to.
Okay,
No,
my
but-
husband might have objections at some point. He might want dinner. So.
Oh,
But
okay. Oh, okay. Gotcha.
All right, and you live in France, in Paris.
Yes, I live in France. Yeah.
Now, I kind of have this idea in my head that everybody who lives in Paris is always kind of walking around like, "Wow, I live in Paris." Is that true?
It sort of fails after a while, to be honest. I mean, I've lived in it pretty much all my life for 3-4 years, so it's very familiar. So I don't go around like woo, thanks, Bill, and so on. I mean, there's from time to time you will find like awesome things. Like we went to dinner to have dinner with a friend of mine, and he has a cathedral in his basement.
Oh.
He is
Wow.
like they have the parking for the cars is under the building, and apparently there's this little door on the second floor of that parking that leads right into a chapel. Like for 70 or 80 people, and it's perfectly preserved, and they've built on top of it. And I'm like, okay, this is weird.
Yeah, that's not something you'd normally see in the U.S.
No, guess not.
Yeah, and you so then French was your first language, but you write all your books in English. Do you write them first in English, or do you translate them over?
No, I don't. I mean, one of the big things when you turn, at least for me, when I turn bilingual, is like I stop having a link between both languages.
Mm-hmm.
So I just like think in one, or whichever most convenient one there happens to be, which sometimes happens like I'll look for a word in French, and the most convenient word will turn out to be in English, so it will come out in English.
Oh.
The perplexity of everyone around me. That's that's another problem. But yeah, I write in English, and in fact, when I got translated back into French, I had a translator, and I just reread the translation to make sure that everything was more or less as I envisioned it, quote unquote, which was mostly terminology. But I can't translate myself.
Oh, okay. And now, what was the decision to write in English? Is it is it easier to write in English, or was it just that there's not much of a market for the speculative fiction over there, or what factors went into that?
Well, it was mostly, I discovered like actual science fiction and fantasy when I was living in London,
Uh-huh.
when I was 16, 17. And so all of my reading took place in English. So when I started writing, it was pretty much natural to do it in English as well. And well, I mean, it is also true that there's not much of a market for it in France, but that's more like a bonus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was trying to think the other night if there's much of the same kind of, I guess, like sci-fi fantasy kind of revival that's going on now. I just wondered if that kind of went everywhere or if it was, more localized to over here.
It's really complicated because there's a lot of cultural dominance of like anything that is US and UK, so like a lot of our bookshelf space is taken over by translated science fiction from there. So, I mean, it's a little of a chicken and egg problem. I don't really know which is which, but we also don't have much of a local market. So I don't really know if like it's because the bookshelves are flooded or if it causes the bookshelves to be flooded. So I don't know.
Okay.
But I mean, something like that certainly happens here. It's like I can go into a bookshop and I will browse and I will like know the people and they're English or American, whatever.
Okay. So. Nice. And then you said you got kind of into the sci-fi fantasy when you were around 16. Do you remember? What actually got you into it?
I remember, yeah. One of the very first, well, actually, like I can't remember how old I actually was, but the very first book I bought in English for myself was Ursula Le Guin's Earthly Quartet.
Ah.
And I read it with a dictionary because I couldn't understand half the words, so I was looking up, like, I thought, okay, if I look up every single one I don't understand, this could take a long while, so I would just skip the parts that I didn't understand fully well. And I distinctly remember I was like, yield. I need to know what that word means because it keeps cropping up. So that was the first book I read. That was conscious or genre, I think. Because I also read a lot of like Patricia McKillip and Tanith Lee and so on when I was a kid, but they're sold as kids' book.
Yeah.
They're sort of packaged in the same general fiction for kids area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of had the same thing. Although I actually didn't get back into. Well, I started off when I was a kid, the Narnia and the Tolkien books. But then, yeah, I went kind of away from it until maybe like 2-3 years ago. So I'm still kind of new to the whole speculative fiction thing. I kind of got into like the literary fiction and never really got into like courtroom or the detective ones, but.
Oh, I love the detective one.
Oh yeah. Well, I can tell because we have maybe some of that influenced Obsidian and Blood series.
No, definitely. It's. I mean, in France, you have like historical crime fiction is really big.
Oh.
It really works well. So we had this guy called Christian Jacques who probably got translated into a lot of languages by now. Who wrote those like sort of like epic-ish, thriller-ish books that took place in ancient Egypt.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
And I really loved when I was a kid, so I was trying to go for kind of the same feeling. They had magic and mystery that merged into a historical setting.
Oh wow, that sounds really fun.
But
I've never heard of those. I was gonna look those up. Nice. Oh, Guillermo, what were you saying?
Oh no, I'm just saying it. Yeah, I mean, it definitely comes through, and I mean the. Oh wow. I'm so eloquent today. I completely forget the word for for influence. Yeah, you can really see the, the influence in the in Servant of the Underworld. At least, that's unfortunately that's the only one that I've read so far. But yeah, it's completely there. I mean, it was great, kind of seeing that put into a completely different setting that I really hadn't I hadn't really read before myself, because I hadn't read the books that you read that sort of spurred this here. But yeah, it was really cool to kind of get those things together. I mean, did you have a decision that you made for this, or were there other cultures that you thought of also, or is it what was that the line to that decision to setting it in the Aztec Empire?
Mostly I took Spanish classes, and what happens in Spanish classes is they give you a sort of like history of the Spanish that includes the history of the Spanish colonial empire, and they mostly give you like a bunch of Spanish texts, and I was like, hang on, like when they're describing the Aztecs as like bloodthirsty barbarians, I don't really think you should trust those guys, because I mean we also studied the life of Cortes, and I was like, I know where the bloodthirsty barbarians are, and they're not on this side of the table. They're the conquistadors. So I thought, like, you basically can't trust anything that those guys are saying. So I thought there had to be more to the civilization than this. And then I read a book that was, I think it was, it's a David Gemmell book, but I can't remember which one it is. It has like villains that are inspired by the Aztecs, and it's very clear they have like pyramids and they sacrifice people on top of it, and they're like irredeemably evil. And I was like, come on, no one is like that. Like a civilization that like sacrifices millions of citizens dies instantly. So I thought, okay, like I'm probably gonna make a mess out of it because I'm not a historian, I'm not from like the Mexican culture or anything, but like I'm sure I can do better than what I read. So there was a lot of that in thinking up the book.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, it's good to see that change, from, especially in, I mean, not only in books, but also in movies, how the natives are also, it's sort of either, they're the noble savage, or they're the, bloodthirsty,
the savage.
Yeah. But it's good to see that change, and I thought it was really different, and being from a sort of going back far enough, I was running through the woods on an island, well, not me personally, but I guess my ancestors. But yeah, I mean, it's good to see that put into that light, instead of being just cannon fodder for the heroes, and this was really good. And then, I mean, not only that, to sort of use that, and then, not only that, but have a really good detective story in there as well. That's one thing that I think in my head, and I'm not sure how I could do, but I see it, and it works out just great in the book itself. I mean, did everything just come together? Did you just sort of decide to put the two together, or just think of it in one? Did you start out with the Aztec part, or you want to set something into Aztec Empire, or did it start out with the detective story, or did it just kind of meld into, just sort of all at once, just kind of organically like that?
Well, it started with a short story that I wrote for Writers of the Future, and like back when I was writing short stories, I had like huge difficulties with plotting. So what I would do is, like, mystery is simple. It's like very structured, and I've been reading a lot of these, so I know how to plot one. So I basically built this mystery that was set. At first, it was a pseudo-Aztec Empire, and what would happen was, like, people who, by and large, did not know the Aztec Empire thought that it was the real thing. And I felt like if 90% of people are convinced that this is the real thing, I might as well make it the real thing and try to actually be as accurate as I can. So that was Obsidian Shards, which was published in Writers of the Future. And when I started writing a novel, I thought, hey, that would actually make for a cooler novel than for a short story, because like it's nice as a structure, But a mystery in a short story is also really hard to pull off because you have not much room for red herrings, plot twists, and so on.
Yeah, it's more a little. It has to be a little more straightforward. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought, yeah, I can do like one of those like historical fantasy mysteries thing, which I wasn't too sure anyone had ever tried, but I thought, hey, let's try complicated.
Yeah. And speaking of the short stories now. Oh wait, hang on. I think I have to flick my microphone. All right, hold on 1 second. I might disconnect for a second. More technical difficulties. All right, hang on.
Cursed, I'm telling you, cursed.
Oh, hang on. All right, now I think that's just the general ambient noise. Okay, good.
Okay.
Curse. All right, or I just need a new microphone.
Am I going to see your microphone on like a side of a milk carton?
Yeah. I'm gonna have to get a new one. So, speaking of short stories and the genre and everything, you do a lot of short stories that are, quite a few of them are sci-fi, and quite a few of them are fantasy, and then the novel series itself, they're more or less fantasy. What's it? How do you decide, or exactly? What's that like going back and forth like that? Or do you prefer one more than the other, or?
Like, are we talking like novels versus short stories?
Oh,
like
well, actually, when it comes,
fantasy?
well, I guess when it comes to genre, like the sci-fi and the fantasy, like, is there one you prefer writing more?
I really see them as like two things that are very close, which they're both about like quite a huge amount of world building, quite a huge amount of like figuring out how people's mindset will change, whether it's because you're in a medieval society and the expectations are very different, or in a far future society and like there have been huge social upheavals that basically don't make this into your 21st century Europe. I mean, I don't really see a clear separation between them, and there's a lot of also. I mean, the main difference, of course, is like science fiction actually has the science part, but the thing is, like, science evolves so fast that in a few centuries it might as well be magic.
Yeah.
There's
Right.
there's nothing I can like predict that won't be totally and utterly wrong in 2 centuries. So for me, it's very much a sort of like, I think technology is just used as you might use anything else, and I don't really need to stop on like how the code is written inside the robot and how you build the space station. They're just here, just like I don't need to detail how you build the castle or the pyramid.
Exactly. Yeah. Which, by the way, I loved. And the name of the story is not coming to me, but the one where it's basically a ship is being birthed.
Oh, I wrote several of those.
Yeah. I mean that was pretty amazing, and I just love that, like how you were saying. There's you can't really see that line between sci-fi and fantasy. It's got to kind of coexist. And that, I think, is a great example of that. And that was just really, that was quite the idea. I guess is what I'm trying to say. It was a little mind-blowing.
I thought, not enough pregnancy stories, not enough SF. Well, I can talk about the birth of computers. That would be fun.
Definitely. And then going back to the short story versus the novel, did you started off with short stories, and was that more or less just kind of practice so that you could ultimately write a novel, or was it just, hey, I'm writing short stories for fun, and then you skip over to writing novels?
I actually started writing novels. 3 of them. Well, 2.5. The first half got lost when my parents' computer crashed on the way back from England to France, which made me learn a very important lesson very early on, which is backups.
Yes.
I am grateful that I learned that before I went any further. Then I had 2 very long fantasy novels, and at that point I was well, having trouble like getting feedback and knowing what to do with that feedback. So I thought, short stories might actually be simpler because it's like easier to read for most people. They're also like short, so I can like more focus on mechanics and craft. So I started writing short stories, and it took me about 2 or 3 years to actually write stuff that were not novellas in disguise. And then I think like I discovered something about writing short stories. I think doesn't really hold true for novels, which is you can do a lot of things in short stories. You can experiment with weird styles. You can like shift stuff around. There's a lot more freedom than you have in novels because you don't hold the reader's attention for that long.
Yeah.
So you're free to like, if I want to tell it in the second person, I can. I mean, you can also do a novel, but it's harder. It requires a lot more.
Yeah. Plus, if people see a novel in second person, they just automatically shut off and won't really be into it. But a short story, you can get away with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Charles Strauss is pretty much the only person I know who's gotten away with second person.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are other people, but I enjoy doing the short stories, so I stayed doing them for a while, and I changed and did novels because I'm very easily bored. So I wanted to try something different.
That's a conversation we were having. I think with somebody else on the show was, when you get a creative person bored, that's when really great things can start happening. So I think that's true. Yeah, if you're sitting around, you got nothing else to do. That's where, that's where these great stories and worlds come from. And on the note of the great worlds, I read on your website that you don't like using the classic, Western, or like Anglo-Saxon medieval type background for fantasy. Which I love, by the way. I think the Corn Man was it. I think is he called the Corn Man or the Corn Husk Man?
The Corn Man.
Corn Man. That was one of my favorite, little world building things ever. And so what brought about that idea to find stuff elsewhere? What did that come out of boredom too?
No, I think it's more like there's a lot of it in that. I mean, how did I put this? The Anglophone fantasy stuff in many ways is a little alien to me. There's a lot of it that's based on stuff. I know I had a huge sense, especially the SF, but it's also true for the fantasy. I used to be a reviewer for Tangent Online, and I used to review Bayan's Universe Analog and Asimov's, I think. And Bayan's Universe had this slew of stories that I just couldn't make sense of. And I was like, this is like really odd. And I was talking about it to my husband, and he said, it's not because you speak English that they're actually very close to you on a mindset level. And I was like, but this is like really, I don't understand it. And he's right in that there are a lot of different expectations. And I mean, you don't think about it because I tend to think of like English is the UK. The UK is relatively close to me, to France, culturally speaking. But in fact, the US is fairly far from what I'm used to. And then, of course, there's the fact that, for instance, if you say dragon to me, I don't think lizard that breathes fire. I think lovely little creature that flies in the sky and brings rain, because that's the stuff I read when I was a kid. And that's how dragons are in Asia.
Yeah. Like I said, I really enjoy reading those stories that are a little different. That you don't automatically, you don't automatically think, Lord of the Rings. And that's like the big go-to for most of these fantasy stories. Is like, oh, this is just like Middle Earth. And I love now that there's, there's you and there's N.K. Jemisin and Saladin Ahmed, and there's all these different settings out there, and I think that's really, it's a great thing that it's coming to light more, and it's kind of getting popular. So hopefully that'll remain that way.
Yeah, I hope so too.
All right, and let me see now. Oh yeah, when it comes to writing, it seems like every time we every other author we've interviewed, I always ask this question, or I say, when do you do your writing during the day? And they always say, actually, I should be writing right now. Is that the same with you? Are we taking over your writing time, or do you have no set time?
No, I don't have a set time.
Oh,
I tend to think of it as doing it in the halls, because I have a full day job, so I write on my lunch breaks when I can, but it's not always the case. And I also write in the evenings, but like I used to write like when I was writing Servant of the Underworld, I wrote every evening for 2-3 hours, and by the end I was just like completely knackered. So I thought, okay, gotta space this a little more, find quiet places
Yeah.
and relaxation time.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Probably I should be writing, but I'll get over it.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, like I was mentioning earlier, I do practically all of my writing at about. I don't usually get started until about 1 or 2 in the morning.
Ooh.
And yeah, that's because of the job I work with, the overnight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I mean, I work overnight security at like a gigantic retirement community.
Oh.
Yeah, so and all of them go to bed at 9 o'clock at night. So I have the whole place to myself for several hours. So I just sit and write, and it's nice and quiet.
Mm.
And now, do you? Well, we might get into this in more detail later. But do you outline beforehand, or do you just go in there and start writing Discovery style?
I'm probably not very usual in the sense that I'm a real control freak.
Oh.
And I'm also an engineer. And the one thing I learned from engineering is you can fix stuff relatively early, big stuff relatively early, and relatively easily in design phase.
Mm-hmm.
But once the stuff is actually hardwired, it's a little harder. And I had this traumatic experience where I decided to basically change the gender of my character in an entire novel.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, this sucks. You know what? I need better planning. So
Yeah.
I usually don't start writing without a fairly good idea of where I'm going. And if I diverge too much from the outline that I have set, I will rewrite the outline, pause and rewrite the outline rather than go on blindly.
Well, that's good. Yeah, that I could just imagine how tedious that would be to have to go in and find every she and change it to he.
Yeah, well, it was
Yeah.
the she changing. It was an it changing to he, which is even worse. I think.
Oh.
It's everywhere.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You can't just do the auto find and autocorrect like that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, auto find and auto replace I do very carefully. I tend to forget to take the whole thing that says whole word, and it gets funny.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that and also probably your spell check was already probably going crazy with all the names for your characters that it didn't recognize. But it's like, what, Shokiketzel? What? And then it just dies. I don't know. Mine does it because I'm a horrible speller, but yours probably does it with just the names of the of your characters.
I know I have passed an important phase in the Life of a Novel project when my spell checker is mad.
Yeah.
I have enough words. They're all weird.
Yeah, I could just imagine all the red squiggly lines that would be there. Because I don't think spell check knows what Quaxacotl is.
No.
Yeah. Let me. Oh, hang on. Let me cross this stuff off my list. I'll edit out all this stuff in the middle at the end. So when it comes to editing, actually, since you do the outlining, do you find that editing is easier now, or that it's a little tougher, and also do you wait until you have everything down on paper before you start editing it out, or do you kind of edit chapter by chapter?
I generally don't edit a lot as I go by. I will sometimes do it if something goes really wrong and I need to fix it, because I'm sort of like, I can't psychologically write knowing that something is deeply wrong 2 chapters before. So that I will usually fix if it's really big. But I like my momentum when I'm writing, so I try not to stop too much. I will, for any like really serious editing, I will wait until the actual novel is finished. Um, I I actually like editing because unlike the actual outlining or writing process, which are very sometimes very frustrating because it's all going along swimmingly well, and then for no reason at all, it isn't.
Yeah.
Which I find annoying. I also have a word with unused. But what happens with editing is I will usually like edit. I will leave holes sometimes, or like if I have to really look a quick thing up, like what's the color of the emperor's dress, I will just do a square bracket check color thing. And so I replace all of these. I smooth out the timeline as best as I can, and then I ship it off to readers, and I wait for feedback before I will do anything. And what I usually do is I do a list. I'm very control freak. Sorry, it's the engineer thing. I will do a point by point list of like what I think should be fixed, like item by item, and cross items off the list. This is very satisfying in a way that writing isn't. Sometimes isn't. It's also very satisfying, of course. But there's this whole sense of like I am crossing items off a list, and once I have reached the bottom of the list, it is done.
Oh,
at least
nice
for now.
Is. Yeah. Until you get those the critiques
Revision
back.
Yeah. The critiques back or the revision letter back.
Yeah. Nice. So I had a question, and then we started talking about that, and I totally forgot what it was. Guillermo, do you have anything to add? We're kind of near the end. Of the general interview. Is there anything you would like to add before we?
Oh no, I'm just I like the fact that it was this was research, and there's not a lot of research when it comes to the Aztecs, at least not pre-conquest. So I mean, I don't know, I would have been tempted myself to just just make things up, since it's not like an Aztec is gonna like walk up to me like as I'm walking at a Starbucks and like punch me for getting something wrong. But I just I thought it was really great. I don't know, it really as kind of, I don't know, as weird as it sounds, I don't know, it kind of sounds like the culture was really respected by doing that, and I thought it was really cool.
Well, I mean, I did try to research everything as well as I could. I mean, of course, like it's a very I'm not from that culture, so it's always very difficult to actually mind that. Probably the biggest. If there's a failure to the book, it's probably that. But I mean, I would have no idea. But I did try to get my hands on like everything that I could, and like you said, there isn't much, so it's actually a fairly short. Well, to read it is a short process. To actually get hold of it is not that short.
Yeah.
But I got to make things up a little, like when I couldn't find stuff, basically. There was like. Not in this book, but in the next one there was, I think I couldn't find out when an emperor had died, and like I looked at all the books and I asked teachers and they said, we don't know. I was like, okay. Well, I'm gonna make it coincide with an eclipse of the sun because I need it for the plot. And I don't feel too guilty about it because, well, I don't have any trace of that.
Yeah.
Well, right. Well, the thing is, it's different when it's an unknown. Then it's understandable. But when it's something that could be, looked into, then that's something else. Because I'm like, yeah. Did you know Aztecs had forearms? Yeah. I mean, not forearms. I mean, 4 arms. And then pretty sure I'm gonna get called on that. But something more subtle is it's. I just thought it was really great that you put really. Just so much thought even into the the individual characters. They feel like individual, really fleshed out people. I mean, when it comes to these characters, do you have sort of archetype in your head that you work from, or do you sort of add them based on what you need for the story and add their sort of their personality traits just by that?
It's a little of both, I think. I mean, with Kadle, I basically, like the main character, I basically knew that he had to be this kind of inquisitive person, but also that the plot would call for him to have a strong moral sense that would actually be at odds with what most other characters were expecting.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually do, well, what I do, I only do that for novels, but I have a main character template, which is like a sheet that has bio info, relatives' names and relatives' ages, because like I always get the same thing, like trying to move an event in time is horrible. Like 8 years ago, hang on, I bet that was 6 years, or was it 5?
Yeah.
And then what I will have is what they want most, what they fear most. I can't remember what the other two are. What they love most and what they hate most. And I also added their attitude to like the main defining things in their society. So politics, religion, marriage, and the opposite gender, and a bunch of other stuff. Family, probably, at some point. So I basically, filled in the bits that I knew the plot imposed, and then I made stuff up to complete a sort of character portrait, and I did that for like most of the main characters. And when I have secondaries, I just do the wants most, fears most, hates most, loves most.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's. Great. I mean, it's. Well, yeah. I mean, it again. That really just it comes out that the characters feel really fleshed out, which is I don't know. It's sometimes it's. I've always thought that it was sort of a balance where I'm like, well, do I want to, plan the characters out, or do I just want to let them kind of just happen, just through discovery writing? And I don't know. I think it's cool that you can, you're a meticulous outliner, but you could, like there's so much detail that goes into the characters that. Possibly, most of it that, it's in your head and it's not in the novel itself, but it definitely comes through with, the actions and everything like that. And I thought that was really neat. I wish I could be that good.
I'm not. I do want to point out. I'm like I make it sound like I'm totally organized, but like there have been characters that have like come out and surprised me. For instance, like Calvin's sister was like she didn't even have a character sheet, I think.
Oh.
And then she came and she was like this. This person who kept poking at Cal, and I thought, okay, she's gonna need one. Hang on, let me retcon this.
Like, oh, she just got important. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, good. So on that note, Aliette, it was a pleasure having you on our show.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and it was really interesting and really discussion. Bar the odd technical problem that we had at the beginning. But I'm sure
yeah.
Smooth out in edit.
Yeah, me having to punch my microphone. I might have to edit that out. Before we let you go, I just wanted to make sure we got everything covered. There's the Obsidian and Blood trilogy, which was Servant of the Underworld, Harbinger of the Storm, and Master of the House of Darts. And then, like I said, this will be going up beginning of July, and I think by then. The Obsidian and Blood Omnibus, which is all three of them together, has come out on June 26th.
Yeah, and it will. I mean, the ebook will have all the associated short stories in it. The physical book will have a link to the ebook because apparently it was very massive and they couldn't print everything without having an encyclopedia. Oh,
really? Wow. That's
that was the explanation I was given.
Yeah. That's nice. Well, we have those, and then there's your website, AlietteDeBodard.com.
Yep.
And you can actually get some pretty good cooking tips on there as well.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. So there's all that, and anywhere else that people can follow you or find you online?
I'm AlietteDB on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I'm also on Facebook. I have an author page that you can find. Also, entering my name in the search box.
Well, good times. All right, yeah, I'll put that all in the show notes. And one last thing, is there anything that you're working on that might be coming out soon or later even?
I'm gonna have a short story in like the June issue of Cloudswell, so that should be going out really soon to subscribers, and it's gonna be up beginning of June, which is set in a sort of like alternate future where there's still a Vietnamese spacefaring empire.
Nice. Yeah, like I said earlier, it's great that there's just these kind of I mean, they sound odd just because they're against the norm. But I love how there's this kind of surging now of like alternate kind of worlds to have. I love it, and Anything as far as novel length work that you're working on?
I'm working on a urban fantasy set in Paris, which is focused on like two dynasties of rival magicians at war. But I have a grand total of 300 words on it.
Oh, so that might be a while.
Well, it can be fairly fast, and I've got the outline, and I'm all set. But it's not gonna be like coming out in 2 months.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
So keep looking up online for that. And again, it was real fun having you on. I thank you so much for agreeing to be on our show.
Yeah, thanks for talking to us today.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for the interview and the conversation, the nerdiness.
Oh, awesome. Yes.
Yeah, that nerdiness is not in short supply here.
Not in this household. It's also not in short supply in this household. Don't worry.
I actually was going to ask you what your thoughts on Greedo shooting first. No. But yeah, I might. That might not be pertinent to writing. All right,
And I can't remember the movie that well anyway, so this is heresy.
Oh no, that's
I haven't
okay.
rewatched it in a while.
Oh no, that's okay. After the prequels, I don't really blame anyone for just abandoning it altogether.
Fair point.
But thank you so much for talking to us, and thank you so much for just writing an awesome book and just having it be just so refreshing and different.
Yeah, well, thank you, and sorry about the whole technical shenanigans.
Oh, not a problem at all.
It happens. I think we've kicked the curse. We're good.
Cool.
All right.
Right.
Well,
I mean, if your microphone just bursts into flames as the call ends, then
I'll think
just
of you.
send us the bill because that's our fault. Yeah.
I will.
Right.